This is an on-demand topic that I am taking. Some of the online friends have asked, they need a review of poliomyelitis. Already it has been taken in detail. Now I am not going to take in that detail because they might have felt it too hi-fi. Right? The orthopedic part of poliomyelitis is so huge, it is more confusing. Now what I thought was, I will come down to your level and make it very simple, even more lucid and simple, right, and finish it off as early as possible so that we can cover other topics. What is poliomyelitis? Myelitis, inflammation, itis, inflammation of muscle tissue. Myelin, something is related to spinal cord, brain tissue, neurological tissue, okay, right. Encephalitis, encephalon means brain, clear. So poliomyelitis, commonly called as polio, is an acute infectious disease caused by tuberculosis virus, tuberculosis bacilli. If somebody writes like this, it will be really disgusting. It happens so much in so many exams. I told you last time. So it is caused by polio. That's why I put this. It was already described with the. That's why again put it. It is caused by poliovirus. What is poliovirus? It belongs to a genus Enterovirus and a family of Picornaviridae. Right? It is a neurotropic virus. What happens is, it comes through the mouth or respiratory droplets. It comes into your body. It multiplies in your intestine, and then it spreads into the nervous tissue, goes there, sits in the nervous tissue, damages the neurons. The cell bodies are damaged, and ultimately once your nervous tissue is damaged, it is permanent. Now these neurons are, if at all they are there from medulla down, they are all lower motor neurons. Once these lower motor neurons are damaged, what will happen? You end up in a, and it specifically affects the motor neurons. Once it affects the motor neurons, what happens? The neurons which are supplying the muscles so that the muscles can have the tone and muscles can have this power is gone. Hence you end up in a flaccid type of a pathology. Am I clear here? Simple. So it comes from mouth and goes to your brain, or goes to your brainstem, or goes to your spinal cord, and ultimately damages those neurons. Depending on the damage, you will have the clinical findings, right. So initially once it is in the intestine and it goes into the say the bloodstream called viremia and goes into the neurological tissue, it creates a picture just like any other viral infection. If you can't identify at that phase, it goes and ultimately damages these neural tissues. Ultimately doctor cannot do anything as it is going into and damaging. Literally you and I cannot do anything once it has entered your body and starts multiplying and enters into your nervous tissue and starts damaging. The only thing you can do is sit there, make the patient lie down comfortable, right, make the patient comfortable there, and see to that the recovery whatever that happens, and that recovery whatever that happens after all this pathology is fast, and whatever the remaining muscles which are there and whatever the neurons that are there which are supplying the remaining muscles are taken into a position where they can still support the other structures which are lost, or whatever the other neurons which are lost. So the ultimate role of the doctor in poliomyelitis is you see whatever is remaining that has been eaten away by polio virus, and whatever is remaining is best utilized. Unfortunate, but a doctor can play a major role by preventing it by simple vaccination. So here is a condition where prevention is always better than cure. That is all with poliomyelitis. So what is the pathogenesis? The virus multiplies in the intestine. Here it travels, goes into the blood, goes into the neurons, and ultimately they damage. And 90% of the patients, if at all you are infected with poliovirus, it goes unnoticed. But the rest of the 10% of the patients, and you have some symptoms. Some symptoms, what are they? Those symptoms. 8% of these 10%, they have an abortive poliomyelitis, abortive polio, wherein they don't have any neurological features. They just have features suggestive of any upper respiratory tract infection, simple. And rest 1% will have a non-paralytic polio, that is aseptic meningitis. They will have headache, all the signs suggestive of meningism or meningitis will be there, but they will not end up in acute or a chronically disabled flaccid paraplegia type of situation, right? And 1% of these 10%, right, ends up in paralytic poliomyelitis, and most of them are spinal affected. They can affect the bulbar region also, that is in the medulla. If they affect the cranial nerves which are supplying the vital structures, especially the diaphragm, if it is gone, you end up in a paralysis of the diaphragm, ultimately respiratory paralysis, patient dies of then and there itself. That is the problem with bulbar polio. Spinal, yes, if one group of muscles are gone, let us see other group, if they are becoming overactive or contracture, we will deal with those overaction and contractions, or else we take the advantage of the functioning muscles, reroute them into non-functional areas. That is the role of orthopedic surgeons, right? What are the stages of poliomyelitis? Stage of onset, right? It comes in, multiplies and starts showing that okay, it has come. That is the stage of onset. Stage of maximum paralysis, it is trying to eat away, causing all the damage. At that phase, you should be extremely careful so that the damage is minimized, right? If you try to aggressively mobilize the patient, give intramuscular injections, do tonsillectomy type of surgeries, you end up in a devastating multiplication of these virus and ends up in a very gross damage, right? And stage of recovery. So after the damage that the polio does, you have a recovery phase wherein some amount of neurons which are partially damaged try to somehow recover, and which are permanently damaged, they end up in fibrosis, right? And ultimately at the end, whatever the damage that has been caused by polio virus will be there, and whatever the muscles that are there now start overacting, because the opposite muscles which have been damaged because of the neurons being eaten away by the polio virus, in your language that I am coming so down, okay, now these muscles starts overacting and end up in deformities, right, or weakness of one group of muscles, that is stage of residual paralysis. How do the patients present to you? Usually patients of poliomyelitis don't come to orthopedic surgeons, they go to pediatricians. So it is the pediatrician's job to identify poliomyelitis at this stage so that you don't end up in a late stage where there is already a gross damage. So in early phase, usually they come with a febrile illness which is suggestive of most often any other viral illness, and right, in the early stage, what does the early stage mean? Early stage here on examination part of once doctor comes into picture, it tries to examine. So for examination purpose, we have divided this into two stages, not those 4 stages what I have described in pathology, right? For examination purpose, you divide these things into 2 stages. One is early stage, which includes first 3 stages. The late stage is the post-polio residual paralysis stage. If a patient comes to you in the early stage, he can come in stage 1, stage of onset, where there is a acute febrile illness, or stage 2 maximum paralysis, or stage 3 in the recovery phase. These all have been put together for examination convenience in the early stage, right? In this stage, when the patient comes to you, usually in the first stage you will have fever. In the second stage, what will happen? You will have maximum paralysis. That means one group of muscles will go. Usually lumbar enlargement is the most important area where this polio virus goes and affects. Once this affects, what happens? Lumbar region supplies the lower limbs. So most commonly affected muscle group is quadriceps group, right, which controls the knee extension. So most commonly affected is quadriceps, but quadriceps completely will not be affected. Some partial affection will be there, right, either depending on the percentage. But most of the times complete muscle is paralyzed. If at all it is there, it is tibialis anterior. Tibialis anterior is the dorsiflexor of the ankle. If the tibialis anterior is affected, it most often goes into a complete paralysis, complete loss of that neuron or group of neurons which supply the tibialis anterior. They are completely damaged. Once it happens, you end up in foot drop, right? It so happens this way, right? Whatever the group of neurons is affected, that group of neurons will be supplying one group of muscles. Those group of muscles are badly affected, and it is a flaccid paralysis, flaccid paraplegia, or flaccid affection type, lower motor neuron type of affection, right, leading to loss of that function, right? Next, once the patient comes to in late stage, what happens is anyhow this flaccidity is there in one group of muscles, but if the opposite group of muscles are normally innervated, what happens? This group will pull. Suppose say tibialis anterior is affected, you have foot drop, or the tibialis posterior or the other muscles, gastrocnemius, will they keep quiet? The antagonistic muscles are not there. If you don't have examinations, will you read? Same that way, the antagonism is also extremely important. So if the antagonism is not there, what happens? They go into a phase of contracture, permanent state of shortening, and ultimately end up in deformity of the joint upon which these two group of muscles are acting. So in the late stage, you see lot of deformities. In the hip, you see flexion, abduction, external rotation deformity because of iliotibial band, tensor fascia lata, all these things they cause. Most important is iliotibial band contracture. And in the knee joint, because of lateral hamstring contracture, especially biceps femoris, you end up in triple deformity: flexion, external rotation, lateral subluxation, sometimes posterior subluxation also. Right? This can be because of ITB as well as biceps femoris. So many deformities you see. If I name one deformity, we go into the details of it. That's why what I am doing is going gross. It is a flaccid paraplegia in one group of muscles, flaccid affection, lower motor neuron type of affection in one group, other group of muscles are overacting and leading to deformity. So when it comes to differential diagnosis of this poliomyelitis, in the initial phase, influenza, osteomyelitis, septic arthritis, all of them come. Once you end up in late stages, all other these presenting stage in the residual paralysis, you have to rule out myopathy. Is it really a problem with the neurons or muscles? Is the most important thing you need to rule out, right? That is myopathy. At the end of it, you have peripheral neuropathy, right? It can be a neuropathy, but it is not affecting the neuron there per se, it is affecting the axon. Peripheral neuropathy affects the axon, the myelin is gone. So all these things, they come under differential diagnosis. Got it? What happens in peripheral neuropathy when the axon is gone? It is a mixed type of a problem, most often sensory, but there, here in poliomyelitis, it is pure motor, no sensory. Sensory deficit will not be there in poliomyelitis. Here in peripheral neuropathy, it is most often sensory, glove and stalking type of sensory deficiency will be there. This is the difference, right? In myopathy, what is there? I told you, in myopathy, the problem is there in the muscle. When the problem is there in the muscle, if you do nerve conduction studies, nerve conduction study will be normal. When you test the nerve per se, nerve will be normal. But if you do a ENMG, muscle studies also, electromyography, then these things will be abnormal. Am I clear here? So that is the difference between neuropathy and myopathy. Here, if you try to test a muscle which is innervated, you get one type of spike. But if you test a muscle which is not innervated, muscle is not innervated by a nerve, then you get another type of fibrillation waves will come. All those differences will come in to give a differential diagnosis of whether it is a neuropathy or a myopathy.